During the presidential primaries in 2015, Media Research Center President Brent Bozell, oh, Jesus. Brent Bozell, he is a conservative piece of crap.
Conservative PC.
Yep.
Conservative piece of
Called out Comcast for NBC's blatant bias when hosting debates. Well, yeah, the blatant bias against Bernie Sanders. Yeah, unbelievable. Jeez.
Darren, this
Like I said, I hate using newsbusters, but damn it, if the shoe fits, wear it.
Can I give now an example of how the corporate long knives not only trip up Bernie with a ridiculous question? Here's an exact method and tactic that Pelosi pulled. Okay, I'm going to say the Green Deal is the most popular social program in American history that will be totally and completely rejected. It was voted down, what was it, 300-something to 0, okay? Ocasio-Cortez message, a true progressive, from the future is flawed from the start because it fails to tell us how the progressives will defeat the corporate wing of our own party. That's the issue. Personified by people like Nancy Pelosi, who is right in her estimation that there are only one or two handfuls of Ocasio-type leftists in Congress. One of them is Bernie, Ocasio, right? There's only a handful.
Yeah.
But they're worried about him. Now, here's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
This is how the DNC, this is how the party works. If you don't know, Jeff Winston, what an establishment Democrat is, put your drink down and listen to the radio. Here we go.
He actually just needs to take a look in the mirror and he'll see one.
Here it is. The plan that Nancy put forth, the party's corporate leadership, was determined to make AOC and her left Democratic colleagues an endangered species on Capitol Hill. That's why the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee imposed a new rule, blacklisting political consultants that back challengers to Democratic incumbents. That means if you have a progressive and you are backing them in consulting or backing them even as a supporter financially, the Democratic Party, nobody knows about this, passed this law, okay, according to Ro Khanna, who's a leftist Democrat from California, says clearly, if this policy remains in place, it will mean there will never be another Ayanna Presley or AOC to emerge. It's absolutely wrong. And it is structured legislation from the Democratic Party that says any doors that will get us another AOC, we're going to weld them shut.
Yeah. This is actually not a law, it's their rules. Because the law would be government.
Right, but it is we can say there's laws in other institutions besides government.
Yeah.
And in the Democratic Party, they're making damn sure the progressives won't take another breath.
If a vendor signs a contract or does any work for a primary candidate to an already established Dem, they're shut out of the process.
And I bet you could put in the front seat of my car how many people in Grand Rapids are aware of that law.
And the DCCC is responsible for this.
This shouldn't surprise you, folks. This didn't just start with Bill Clinton. Every progressive has joined the graveyard going back to Gene McCarthy when I was young. Probably named people don't even realize. Then George McGovern. Then we talked about Jesse Jackson, who stood on progressive. They assassinate. They will do the same with this one.
Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter got a primary challenge called Senator Ted Kennedy. They primaried a sitting president because he was against war and wouldn't invade countries.
This is going to step on their toes. It is the job of corporate Democrats to defend corporate interests. This isn't complicated, especially when Medicare for All is supported by 85% of registered Democrats. 85%. And we got one candidate who is standing on it. Mm-hmm. An amazing 92% of Democrats and 64% of Republicans support the Green New Deal. The one we just talked about that are going to make sure never sees the light of day.
Yeah.
92%. The Democratic Party is the first line of defense of corporate America. The place where progressive legislation can be smothered in its crib and supermajorities are corralled and neutered. Nancy Pelosi is the Democratic leader precisely because the corporate moneybags trust her to neutralize the party's base at every stage of the money-soaked process. And that now includes Biden. Mm-hmm. Nancy and Biden will get the corporate backing they will make sure that their interests are protected.
Absolutely.
If you're listening, Jeff Winston, and you need any more clarification, please let me know. You know where to get me. I have a Facebook page. If this isn't clear enough, if this isn't a clear enough definition for you for what the hell an establishment Democrat is, I can't do any better.
The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, they're all corrupt. They're all for the corporate interest. They don't care about the little guy. They never did. And if you need to believe that, you better start doing your research. Don't take our word. Do not take our word for it. Do your own research. You'll find the same conclusions we found.
There's a local example. His name is John Conyers, the revered Democrat establishment in Detroit. Preached every year about single-payer health coverage. Would stand up at the empty podium and then film that and show his followers. Yep. He wanted single-payer. He wanted single-payer. We had one candidate come to the state in the primary named Bernie Sanders. Conyers was a superdelegate. Here's his chance to stand up for a guy believing in single-payer, right?
Yeah.
Who did he back?
Did he vote for Bernie Sanders?
Hell no.
No?
No, he went with Hillary.
Yeah, exactly.
Who was never clear on her health position in her life.
Exactly.
No, so that's an establishment Dem. Mm-hmm. That's a guy that says, hey, who's the party want? It's Hillary. Okay, forget it, Bernie. I know you're going with my long hobby horse issue, but forget it.
Yeah. Where are you getting that article from that you've been reading?
The one I'm reading? Black Agenda Report.
Which used to be broadcast in this town, but unfortunately isn't anymore. I will say that if your Pacifica station is not carrying Black Agenda Report, ask them to do so. Give them a call. Let them know.
The title is Stop Sanders, the Year of the Corporate Long Knives.
Yep.
They will massacre him.
I think we've beat up on the corporate Dems long enough. Now it's time to beat up on the Republicans because they deserve it as well. Now, I've got this story. This is by Paul E. It's not been a good week for the Republicans here in Michigan. This is from Paul Egan at the Detroit Free Press out of Lansing. Michigan would get new state legislative and congressional maps for the 2020 election and even special state Senate elections under a sweeping federal court judgment Thursday to end a gerrymandering lawsuit. A 3-judge federal panel ordered the state legislature to redraw at least 34 districts for the 2020 election in a lawsuit brought by the Michigan League of Women Voters. Though the ruling only explicitly affects those 34 districts, the effects of the ruling are sure to be broader since redrawing any district can also impact neighboring districts. And in what may be an unprecedented aspect of the decision, it requires special state Senate elections to be held in 2020 instead of 2022 as scheduled. State Senate elections are normally held every 4 years to coincide with elections for governor, but the lawsuit targeted 10 of Michigan's 38 state Senate districts, and the federal panel ruled that all 10 were unlawfully gerrymandered. An appeal, which Michigan Republicans promised soon after the decision was released, would go directly to the U.S. Supreme Court. The opinion, signed by Circuit Judge Eric Clay, who was appointed by former Democratic President Bill Clinton, said, quote, "Today this court joins the growing chorus of federal courts that have in recent years held that partisan gerrymandering is unconstitutional." End of quote. The ruling comes after newly elected Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson offered a much more modest proposal to settle the lawsuit. Republicans successfully fought the proposed settlement, which would not have affected state Senate or congressional districts in 2020, forcing the entire case to go to trial. Benson issued a statement saying she respects the court's decision. Laura Cox, chairwoman of the Michigan Republican Party, said the party disagrees with the ruling and, quote, "will support an appeal to uphold the will of Michigan voters," end of quote. By the way, the Michigan voters in 2018 said that no more we're going to have actual panels of citizens draw the lines. So there's the will of the voters, folks. Don't believe Laura Cox. She's a liar, too, my opinion. Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, Republican Clark Lake, said an appeal is planned. Michigan's gerrymandered districts, approved by Republicans who controlled both chambers of the legislature plus the governor's office, deliberately discriminate against Democratic voters by diluting the power of their votes, Clay wrote on behalf of the unanimous panel. Republicans, quote, enjoyed great success in Michigan's 2012 elections, end of quote. The first election using new lines they drew after the 2010 census, quote, due in large parts to the efforts of Republican legislators and map drawers, end of quote. The opinion continues to read this, quote, the evidence points to only one conclusion. Partisan considerations played a central role in every aspect of the redistricting process, end of quote. The judges gave the GOP-led legislature until August 1st to submit new maps which would need the signature of Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. If that deadline is missed, the court will draw the new maps under the ruling. Let them, good, I hope the court does. They can't win any other way other than by lying, cheating.
Right. Absolutely.
The ruling will only affect the 2020 election because Michigan voters approved a new independent citizen redistricting commission to draw election lines for the 2022 election and beyond following completion of the 2020 census. Voters, not politicians, the group that led the ballot drive to create the redistricting commission, applauded the ruling. Nancy Wang, the group's executive director, said, quote, we agree with the court ruling that existing maps were drawn with political interests in mind rather than accurately representing Michigan voters. We hope the legislature will draw this set of interim maps to represent voters, not politicians, just like 61% of Michigan voters supported in the last election. End of quote. Judy Karen Jeff, president of the League of Women Voters of Michigan, said she was pleased with the opinion and looks, quote, forward to remedying all of these districts in time for the 2020 elections, end of quote. The federal panel, which included Clay of the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals, U.S. District Judge Denise Page Hood of Michigan's Eastern District, and U.S. District Judge Gordon Quist of Michigan's Western District, said those involved in the 2011 redistricting effort elevated partisan considerations at every step. Here's what the judges wrote. Quote, their primary goal was to draw maps that advantaged Republicans, disadvantaged Democrats, and ensured that Republicans could enjoy durable majorities in Michigan's congressional delegation and in both chambers of the Michigan legislature for the entire decade.
Folks, we try to limit the amount of local stories we have because we have stations all over the country that listen to Southpaws. Mm-hmm. But this is a national story because what's happening here in Michigan is not atypical to any other area of the country.
Yep. They published a list here. Here are the list of congressional districts that will be impacted. In Congress, it'll be the 1st, 4th, 5th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th districts. I don't see anybody locally for the state senate. It looks like that's mostly the east side of the state. However, for the state house, it affects both Grand Rapids districts, 75th and 76th. So those will have to be redrawn. So, wow.
Yeah, that's the tendency.
Yeah. Sure. And then I have one more story that's a judicial story that's coming out of Michigan. This is by Matthew Schwartz at NPR. This is dated April 23rd. Let me ask you this, Jack. Have you ever had your car tires marked with a piece of chalk by parking meter enforcers? Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, they can't do it anymore. Here's the ruling on here's the story first. The next time parking enforcement officers use chalk to mark your tires, they might be acting unconstitutionally. A federal appeals court ruled Monday that chalking is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The case was brought by Allison Taylor, a Michigan woman who the court describes as a frequent recipient of parking tickets. The city of Saginaw, Michigan, like countless other cities around the country, uses chalk to mark the tires of cars to enforce time limits on parking. By the time Taylor received her 15th citation in just a few years, she decided to go after the city, and specifically after parking enforcement officer Tabitha Hoskins. Hoskins, Taylor alleged in her lawsuit, was a prolific chalker. Every single one of Taylor's 15 tickets was issued by Hoskins after she marked a tire with chalk and then circled back to see if Taylor's car had moved. That chalking, Taylor argued, was unconstitutional. Taylor's lawyer, Philip Ellison, wrote in a court filing, quote,